to The Insomniac Show with Nicolette and Brian. We'll get real deep with you, educating, inspiring, and solving problems with some of the most inspirational humans on the planet. Buckle up and come on the journey.
I'm excited. All right, guys. I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Patricia Roberts. She is the COO of Gift of College, and she's also author of this book right here, Route, I say Route, I don't know if you say Route 529. And she's going to talk to us today about saving for college. And this is a really, really important topic. So thank you so much for coming on to join us today, Patricia. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about how you got here? How does one get to such an expertise in this area?
Oh, absolutely. So the basis for my expertise comes from both my personal background and my professional background. And a little bit about my personal background. I grew up in a very low income household filled with love, but really no money to spare, headed by a wonderful single mom with 4 children, one of whom is disabled. Very limited resources. And in fact, my high school guidance counselor suggested strongly that I not go to college, that I stick with the waitressing job I had because it was helping my family so very much. My mom said, go anyway, we are going to figure this out. And I ended up going to college. I worked multiple jobs, sent money home to help my mom and that one brother of mine, versus the kids who were getting the checks sent to them at college. But I made it through. I ended up also going to law school at night a number of years later here at Brooklyn Law School in Brooklyn while working full time. And I will say those 2 degrees are the reason I was able to lift my family and myself out of the poverty in which I grew up. So I am a huge fan of higher education and the many doors it can open. So that's that background. I did, however, even with working those multiple jobs, I ran up a lot of debt. So I have a personal experience with not being prepared for the cost of higher education. I ultimately, in terms of a professional standpoint, when I was an attorney at Citigroup doing corporate law, they needed an attorney to learn about Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code. And that's the section that's created these 529 college savings plans. I was assigned the task. I happened to have been just newly expecting my son, Benjamin, who's now a college senior. And I was also, together with my husband, paying back over $100,000 in student loans at the time. So I was interested in this topic that I was assigned, and I ended up becoming quite an expert from a legal perspective. And the second I got back from maternity leave, since I knew about the existence of these accounts and how they worked, I began contributing directly from my paycheck. And the story ends well because the son of mine, Benjamin, is graduating debt-free from college in June up in Worcester, Massachusetts from Clark University. So all those years of small contributions when my husband and I had no idea how we could possibly pay back our own student loans, afford a babysitter, get a bigger apartment, pay for all the things we needed. We still managed to do it because we were determined that this child of ours would have a less stressful experience than we had. And I'm telling you, we kept that vision in our hearts. We kept contributing even small amounts over time, and it's all worked out. So I'm just on a mission to tell other families that they do not have to wind up in as much student loan debt as we're hearing in the news, because it's disheartening. There is a way to avoid it.
Do you think most parents don't even think about saving until like the child's in school? Or do people, like you said, as soon as you were pregnant, you were like, oh, let me start saving, right? Do you think it's at a certain point you go, okay, like where do most people go start learning about the 529C,
Well,
right?
you know what, Brian, if it's okay, why don't we talk about what a 529 is for those who may not be familiar, and then lead into that, because I think that's really important. Some people know they have to save, right? To Brian's point, when does that happen? But what exactly is the 529 plan for those who don't know and who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so let's start with that, and then we'll get to Brian's really good question because it's interesting when people do get started. So what is a 529 plan? I mentioned Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code, and that's the section of the code that created these plans. You often hear of 401k plans or 403b plans. Those are also sections of the Internal Revenue Code where savings vehicles have been designed to help people save for long-term expenses or long-term plans on a tax-advantaged way. And that's what 529 is. These plans have been around over 25 years, nearly 25 years. This August will be the 25th. And still, 65% of the population does not understand what they are. So we're going to help your audience today. So how do they work? They are specially designed investment accounts that allow individuals to contribute after-tax dollars. So you've already earned the money, put it in the account. Those contributions grow on a tax deferred basis. You're never charged any, you're not paying tax as the account value grows. So that's the first aspect. And you never pay tax on that account growth as long as when you withdraw the money from your 529 account, you use it for some form of qualified higher education expenses. And I'll talk to you about what those are. It's a broad range. So these accounts are designed to let people accumulate some money without having to pay tax on it every year, and to never have to pay tax if they use it for the intended purpose. Beyond that tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawals, 34 states, I believe, including New York, where you're located, allow residents to take an annual state tax deduction or credit in some states. In New York, it happens to be a deduction for contributions to 529 college savings plans. The states want to incent families to save. So in New York, where I also live, if you're a married couple filing jointly, you can take $10,000 a year as a state tax deduction for your contributions to the New York 529 plan. I will tell you that every state except Wyoming, and also the District of Columbia, has at least one 529 plan. Some states have multiple plans, and individuals can find out about them by Googling online. Go and do a search, put the name of your state and the numbers 529. You can find out about what your state has. If you're not comfortable investing on your own, although many people do open a 529 and contribute on their own, you can certainly, if you happen to have a tax advisor or a financial advisor that you're working with anyway, great idea to ask that person because they're looking out for your total financial picture. But you can really get started quite easily, and you can enjoy this tax advantage treatment. What do you need to use the funds for? You need to use them for some form of higher education expense. These can be used at not just four-year colleges, but two-year colleges, four-year colleges, trade and technical schools, even for registered apprenticeships as well. So there's a wide range of institutions you can use them for. They don't need to be in state, in the state that you live. They can be anywhere across the US as long as they're an accredited institution that accepts federal financial aid. And in many cases, these can be institutions across the world as well. So you can use them at these institutions, and you can use them for the following things: tuition, fees, room and board, books and supplies and equipment needed for your course of study, and even computers, software, peripherals, the internet. The kids have needed internet now more than ever with remote learning. So all those forms of expenses can be covered by a 529 plan. So those are the basics: the tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals, many states with a tax deduction or contribution, and a wide range of uses.
You know, and I think one of the things you brought up in there that most people don't realize is you could use it for trade school. It's not so much just for 4 and 2 year colleges. You could use it for accredited trade schools also.
Right.
That's
and you've
right.
answered actually a couple of my questions right in that description. I know we want to get to Brian's question, so I'm going to follow. I'll circle back on that in a minute. But to Brian's point, it's actually surprising. I'm actually shocked, on a side note, that this has been around for that long. And it's funny because, you know, my sister, she went to Quinnipiac, and my father spent an exorbitant amount of money on that. But he could have started this. And it's funny because when I had my son, he's like 529, 529, don't do what I did, 529. So it's he had that accessible to him and he didn't even know.
Yeah. Most of us really honestly didn't even hear about this until what, like 10, 12 years ago? You started hearing about this?
Right.
Really?
My sister was already almost in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I try to tell families it is never too early to get started. And I also feel it's never too late. I try to be encouraging to individuals to let them know whatever they can save for their child's future is that much less that they're going to need to borrow and repay with interest. So no need for regrets about not starting early enough. Just get started.
Right.
People can even open an account when they're expecting. You do need a beneficiary with a social security number to ultimately establish the account. But what I advise people, if they're comfortable doing so, is set it up with yourself as the beneficiary, because these accounts can be established for someone other than your child. In fact, you don't even need to be related to the beneficiary. A godparent could open it, a friend or neighbor, a grandparent in your father's case. But you can set it up if you're expecting, either expecting an adopted child or expecting to deliver a child, whatever the case may be. If you're expecting for the future, or you just even hope in the future you're going to have a family, set it up with yourself as the beneficiary. And then when that child arrives and you have the information you need, which is the child's name and social security number, you can go ahead and flip the beneficiary to that new person. But why do people not know? With nearly every state having a plan and the states working so hard to raise awareness, it's just not getting through to people. And it's certainly better than it was before. I think one of the challenges, and it's something I work with at my day job, this book was sort of a side project that I wrote, but my day job is related to 529s. We are working very hard to get into the workplace. We feel with these retirement accounts being so successful and accessible, the workplace is the place to really reach the broadest group of people. People are kind of accustomed to signing up for things on your first day of work, or you hear about something from your employer, there's a benefits fair. We believe strongly that employers need to be educating employees about 529 plans. I've been successful with getting a good number of employers of all sizes signed up to at least provide valuable information, and some of them are beginning to match contributions into 529 plans. I am telling employers this is the way to avoid the student loan debt that your current employees have. Help them avoid it for the next generation. Help them avoid it if they want to get an advanced degree themselves. So for 529 Day, my firm, for every employer that's working with us now, we're giving them copies of my book, and unlimited. They can order as many copies as they want for their employees to give for a 529 Day, which is May 29th celebration. And we also have a wonderful educational platform. We don't represent any particular 529 plan. We're not suggesting one over another, but we offer all the information so employees can select for themselves. So I think the workplace is going to be a good place. And then just having advocates who have done it. People like myself, my son is now speaking about the value of it as a college student. I think continuing to get the word out. I'd love to go in and speak at preschool graduations and tell parents, this is the first of many graduations your child's going to experience. Here's a flyer about something you need to know, right? And get them started.
Yeah, and that's a good point, to what we were talking about earlier. Like, most people don't even think about it until maybe their kid is in school, like they've started preschool or they're in kindergarten. They don't even think about, oh, wow, this kid's going to go to college. They don't have that process. And here's a question. How much, right? How much, and I know you talked about little contributions and they all add up, but how much on average should people save for, over that lifetime to make sure their child is debt free to go to college?
It's very much an individual decision based on family circumstances. I mean, every family is different. The number of children in every family is different, whether the parents themselves, like Anthony and I, were paying back our own student loans. So it's hard to say. Certainly any amount is good. I think what a family needs to do, I always tell people to start with the vision. When you're going on a trip, my book's very much about a journey. You start with the end in mind. What's it going to be like when you get there? How are you going to get there? So I encourage families to think about, I know it's early when a child's young, but think about the form of education that you might anticipate your child would pursue or you'd like them to pursue? Is it a public school, a private school? Are you hoping they'll live at home and go to something local? Whatever the case may be, you can get a sense of what those costs would be, and then decide, together with your spouse or partner, if you have one, in looking at your total financial picture, what can you afford to contribute to back into that amount? Most families aren't attempting to save 100%. I mean, it's unrealistic unless you have just one child. And in the case of our child, he also got some scholarship money too. So that all worked out, and he worked himself. I don't think parents should set themselves up to fail. They have to worry about having emergency funds in place first. That comes first above everything. Put your own oxygen mask on first. You've got to have that. Right. You also need to be saving for your own retirement. And you then start working in these other expenses. But I think people should think about the type of school, see what it might cost, and think realistically. Do they want to save a third of it? Are they hoping the child would pay half of it? Don't forget, and I want to talk about this, friends and family. People give your kids stuff. You know it. I know it. I just downsized last year with my son nearing the end of college, and we had so much stuff, and we're not like a consumeristic family, but people gave us a lot of stuff over the years, whether it's stuffed animals and these little outfits from the baby shower forward to games and toys and little things you're stepping on all the time and you wish weren't in your home. One thing you need to do when you're planning for the future, if you're comfortable, depending on the type of family you have and how receptive people might be, is to tell people, thank you. We really appreciate these holiday gifts every year and the birthday gifts, but can we stop it a bit and maybe bring something smaller or nothing at all and contribute towards the college fund? Because those $25, $50, $100 contributions, your kids got 18 birthdays between birth and college. They've got at least 18 holidays. I have to believe every family celebrates at least one holiday a year. And there's a ton of milestones: preschool graduation, kindergarten, middle school, high school. You've got at least 40 events where how many people love your kids? 5, 10, 15, 20. If you can ask those people politely, would they like to, join forces with you and help this child to have a better future? And maybe just give them a little book or something simple or a homemade craft or something. Mm-hmm. That I think is the best approach, because you can't do it alone. And then if you can get into a workplace where you got an employer who's interested, might want to, my employer, and we do work in this field, but they match $1,000 a year of my contributions. That's something, right? I mean, that's great. So you've got to kind of pull in other people. So I can't give you a definite answer on the exact amount. Families need to think for themselves, but get started. Do it on an automatic basis. If you can take it from your paycheck or from your bank or checking account and you don't need to think about it, that's the way to go. And if you can take found money, I talk about this in the book. I know you both have a copy. When that kid gets out of diapers, that's a huge celebration for so many reasons. What a hassle that's behind you, right? With the child's potty trained. Take the money you were spending on diapers, $50, $60, $70 a month on wipes, diapers, whatever you were doing, pull-ups, and put that in a college account. I think I have a graphic in my book that can be $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 from age 2 or 3. You hope the kid's potty trained a little earlier, but whenever they are, take that money. You get tax refunds. The kids now out of daycare and in school, take that money. The spouse or partner can now work a bit more because the children are grown. Take that money. That person's now earning a little bit more. You got to think of it that way. And I will tell you, I mean, I am living proof about how good this feels to be prepared. Mm-hmm. And we are not nervous. We were not, all over the board, how are we going to do this? We went and looked at schools and we knew how much we had to spend. And it just felt good. And now every time a tuition bill comes in, what am I doing? I'm logging onto my 529, taking a distribution. And what my son learned in the process is priceless. This young man knows what it took to get him to where he's at. We didn't beat him over the head with it, but he knew what we were doing. And he has a real appreciation for how do you tackle something that seems so big. You do it a little bit at a time. We drive a 22-year-old car. We never got another car since he was born. It's okay. It still runs. I mean, we live in New York. Maybe we don't, use it as much as people who live in the suburbs or in more rural areas, but we didn't need another car. And when he was in middle school, we decided we weren't even watching cable television. That was like $1,000 a year. We found ways to cut back. And guess what? He's now not stressed out. And I'm feeling pretty darn good about this situation. So it can work out. You just have to do it.
Well, I have a question about the actual investment portion. So this was a
Sure.
question, and we'll answer it for Dad, because he was he's curious why you don't have the ability to, or do you? And we just don't know why you don't have the ability to manage those investments as. Am I saying this right, Brian? Am I asking this question?
Like, you know, how 401k, you could pick like what you contribute to, like I want high risk or I want growth, or, you know, manage the investment with inside the 529, you know, versus just here, you know, I'm putting the money in and I'm getting this much
Right.
back
He
on
says,
it.
here's the money, hope for the best kind of thing. That was his expression.
Yeah, well, first of all, your dad is right in asking about this. Just so you know, the 529 plans have pre-designed investment portfolios that investors like your dad or either of you can select from. They are professionally managed and designed by companies like Vanguard or Fidelity. Merrill Lynch has an option. There's many different ones available depending on the state plan you pick. And you can pick conservative, aggressive, moderate. You can pick something that's 100% equity, but they're pre-designed portfolios. What you can't do is pick the particular stocks within them or the mutual funds within them. This is the way Section 529 was designed. There is a range of flexibility. You can pick from, I think most 529 plans have 5, 10, 15 options from conservative to really aggressive that you can pick from. Many have something called age-based portfolios, which are similar to like target date retirement funds. They're more aggressive when the child's young. They become more conservative over time. And even within those age-based, you can pick conservative, moderate, or aggressive. So there is choice. There's just not the choice down to the level that your dad might like. But that's the way 529 was designed. I think the theory was people with such a long-term investment for something like college shouldn't be day trading or continually switching. You can switch your investment decision twice per calendar year, and you can always change it if you change the beneficiary, because the feeling is maybe for a different beneficiary, you want to change it based on their age or what their aspirations are. So there's more flexibility than maybe your dad realizes, maybe not as much as he likes, but listen, these things work pretty well. And you can see the investment performance online. Of course, not indicative of the future. They always say that you want it, but you can see the track records of these different investments, and you can pick and choose. I put part in moderate age-based, and then as Ben neared college, I just felt a little bit nervous having been through 2008 and some of these other downturns. I put a portion in something that was called stable value that would not really lose value. It wasn't going to gain that much, but I felt like, let me just make sure a portion of this is, I was comfortable foregoing a significant gain to have complete peace of mind. I wouldn't have wanted to do that over the whole course, because I would have needed that growth, because college inflation is like twice the rate of regular inflation. So in my view, I needed some growth, but at the end I was like, let me just make it conservative. So you can decide with certain constraints.
Okay.
I hope that helps your dad.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So how does it stack up, like growth wise, compared to other sort of investment options, right, out there? You know, like I'm just making up, but like crypto, right? If I would have thrown X amount of money in crypto when like my kids were born, like its growth rate would have been X. And I'm just saying, like it could not even be crypto because that's super risky. Like we know that, right? But how does it stack, like the 529, in comparison to other growth rates in investments?
You know, every state plan is different. I would encourage people to look at the state that they're interested in. You can see the 1 year, year to date, 3, 5, 10-year track record and look for themselves. I can't say across the board. I think these programs have generally performed well, fairly competitive. You've got to make sure you understand it's growing tax-free. So there's a benefit to that as well.
Oh,
there's also a benefit. It may not be an investment benefit, but in my mind, there's a benefit to earmarking funds for a particular purpose and not touching them. Because oftentimes, if you have funds mixed in for a variety of purposes, there's always going to be something you need. That new car you need, the house roof is leaking, whatever the case may be. I didn't touch these funds, and a lot of people don't. You can if you need them, and we can talk about what that looks like. but I like the earmarking of it. So I'd say fairly competitive, but I can't say for certain exactly how they stack up against any particular investment because every state has a different program and different investment designs. But people can go look at that and get comfortable for themselves.
And I think you brought up something important there. It's interesting because like 401k, same thing. You're not allowed to take it out without being super penalized, right? The same thing with the 529. If you're taking out for whatever the case is, that it's not tuition or any school related thing, is there a penalization, based on taking it out ahead of time?
Yeah, so let me talk to you about that. First of all, I did say you can set it up for any beneficiary and it doesn't have to be a child of yours. The other thing you should know, you can change that beneficiary at any time. And I just want you to know that because people sometimes ask in connection with the question you're asking, what if the kid doesn't go to college or pursue any form of higher education?
That was actually one of my questions.
Yeah, that's a good one. Highly unlikely in this day and age that a child is not going to pursue any form of higher education. Maybe they take a gap year.
Schools or
yeah,
Too many
books,
kids do trade
supplies,
schools.
computers. I mean, somebody's going to need that money. If the child who is the beneficiary really is not going to school for whatever reason, you can switch that beneficiary to a member of the family. It's a broad range of people. I have it listed in the book. Siblings of the child, cousins, aunts, uncles, yourself. Parents can use the money to go retrain themselves, go learn something new, or maybe they need it for their job. You can save it for that child's children. That's what I intend to do with my son's account. If there's some money left over in the end, he's going to do a graduate degree and we think there'll be a little left over. I'm going to save it for his children. Why not give them a head start should he marry and have children someday? So you can always switch it. You can always take the money out. That's your question. You need it for some other purpose. Absolutely. Couple things to remember are that you did not pay tax on that account while it was growing in value. You're not using it for the intended purpose. You're going to pay tax. Fair enough. So you're going to have to pay tax, ordinary income tax on the gain. So you've saved $10,000. There's a $1,000 gain. Only on that 1,000 do you have to pay tax because you never paid it. Beyond that, there is a federal penalty only on the growth. So only on the $1,000. It's a 10% federal penalty on that growth only. So you'll pay the tax you never paid, and then you'll pay 10% on that $1,000 in the example I gave. It's not a severe penalty, but they want it to have some sort of penalty because the government's not getting tax income on these accounts as they're growing. So that really is. However, if your child gets a scholarship and doesn't need the money, or goes to a military academy and doesn't have any educational expenses, you can take the money out in full with no penalty because you didn't need it. So you just need to keep for yourself the substantiation that your child received a scholarship. You can pull the money out. You do still need to pay the tax though, but no penalty if it's because of scholarship, no penalty, God forbid, due to disability or death of the beneficiary. But if you're just pulling it out for the heck of it, or you need it for something else, you are going to pay that penalty only on the growth.
And I think that's important there because only on the growth, when you pull out of other things, because like a 401k, it's pre-taxed, right? Or whatever the case is. So you pay penalty across the board, on the whole thing that you're pulling out.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. You know what? You brought something up about selecting in your state. And you know what? I understand that you can use the funds across the country, but if you move, do you have to do another 529 in another state? How does that transfer?
That's a great question. So as I said, every state but Wyoming has a plan. We're talking about 529 college savings plans right now. There is another form of 529 that I want to mention to you, which I'm not focusing on, which does have some different restrictions. But the college savings plans that we're talking about, the subject of my book, our topic today, you can invest in any state's plan and you don't need to move it. If you move, you can keep it. You can roll it over. So you're in New York and you move to Colorado. You can keep your New York plan, or if you really want to, you could roll it over into the Colorado plan. What a lot of people do is they open a second plan. Colorado residents, for investing in the Colorado 529 plan, get an unlimited state tax deduction. So that may be a reason once you're living there They're
Right.
not going to give it to you for your contributions to the New York plan. No one's going to penalize you for having that. You might want to keep it. It's performing well. You like a little diversity. They've got Vanguard and they've got Legg Mason or whatever the different
Right.
companies are that run the investments, but you might want to open something new in the new state. So there's no need to invest in your home state program. I tell people to look at it because of these state tax deductions. It might be valuable to you for at least up to a certain amount, up to the 10,000 in New York each year or whatever, to invest in your state's program, but you don't have to. Oftentimes, financial advisors might have a particular 529 that they like, and you work with them. And maybe it's American Funds, which happens to be Virginia's plan, and they happen to really like the performance of American Funds. They might recommend that to you, but that's something you need to decide with your advisor. The type of 529 plan we're not talking about today, there are, I think there's 8 or 10 of these, and I do cover it in my book, called 529 prepaid tuition plans. These are plans that are offered by a narrow number of states. New York is not one of them. Florida has one, though. Texas has one, where you prepay tomorrow's tuition at today's rate. So these are almost like contracts. They're not investment accounts. You do, in those cases, 529 prepaid tuition plans. They relate to tuition only, and you must use them at certain schools in that state for that tuition because you've bought that tuition. This is not what we're talking about today, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned that so you knew.
Yeah, so your child has to go to a state school or whatever it is that are based on that plan. I mean, that's interesting too, if you know your child locally, or if you're in a state that has really great state schools, because some states have, amazing state schools.
That's right. And I think you can, I'm not as familiar, I'm not an expert in those plans, but I believe you can still get your money out if the child then doesn't want to go to a school, and you can use it in another state, but it's not quite the equivalent of what the real value was staying in those state schools and using it for that future. And there's something also I want to mention called the private college prepaid tuition plan. That's not affiliated with any state, but that's an interesting one too. I think it allows individuals to prepay tuition at a pool of like 200 or 300 private colleges. If you happen to know you're a Villanova graduate or whatever the case may be, that your child's going to go to your alma mater, in that plan, I think you can prepay. But again, you've got to go to one of those schools, or you get it out with a lesser value or something.
It's interesting too. And I know this is sort of off topic, but there's a few schools around here, and I'm sure this is probably pretty common in private schools, but if the parent works at the school, free tuition for the students. So a lot of people around here, because tuition is so high, what they'll do is when they retire out, like if they have like if they're a city police officer or whatever, their children are just starting to go to school. So they start working at those universities for free tuition.
That's great. I mean, anything parents and children can do to lower their costs, that's a great idea. That's really great. Yeah, wonderful.
Well, Patricia, you've given us so many great tips, and you've really educated me, definitely, and probably everyone that's listening, because I just learned a whole lot. But you mentioned May 29th is coming up, so that's 529 Day. And I was wondering if you wanted to leave us with kind of wrap it up for us and tell us what we can do. I mean, aside from everything that you've given us so far, what would you say to parents right now? What's your advice right now at any point in the game? How about that?
Sure. I do want to mention for 529 Day, there are a couple of websites where you can see, is there anything special going on in your state? So collegesavings.org and savingforcollege.com should have a listing of any special events in your particular state. Some states are giving contributions to 529s that are open, or there's a raffle, whatever. So I do want to mention that. In terms of tips for parents, I would say develop your vision right away. Step back and say, what do I want this experience to be like when my child's ready to pursue some form of higher education? Get that vision, hold that close to your heart through the years ahead, because it's going to keep you on track. Consider opening a 529 account. It's not the only way to save. It's a way that I know about and that's been effective for me, but look into it and don't wait. There's no sense in waiting. Even if you feel you can't contribute a significant amount right now, get it open and then invite friends and family. That next birthday, that next holiday, the next preschool graduation, just tell people this is what we're doing. People don't know what to buy your kid. You know, save them some time, help your child, help yourself. Automate.
Patricia,
what,
is that what
yes.
those gift cards were? You were holding up a
Yeah.
gift card.
Sure. So first of all, you can almost every 529 allows account owners to send out an invitation for contributions. You could do it that way. If you don't know if a family, if you're listening to this and you know someone you want to give a contribution towards, but you don't want to ask them, have they opened an account? The firm I work for, Gift of College, has gift cards. It's giftofcollege.com. You can order these online. They're available in Target and at other retailers starting at $25. I think they go up to $200. I give these for every birthday, baby shower, whatever. I don't want to get into, do you have an account? You don't have an account? I give them this. I give them a copy of my book. And people say we would have never opened the account but for your gift card, because they can't do anything else with it. They've got to use it as an initial contribution. So you can either invite people through your 529, or if you're friends and family, they can give you a gift card and you can redeem it through my company's website into your 529. So there's a couple ways to go. My other tips: automate if you can, ask your employer, and just remember to not be hard on yourself and to know that whatever you can save is that much less your child's going to have to borrow and repay with interest, and visualize what it's going to feel like. I'm telling you, it feels good to be prepared. I hope everyone will consider doing something and doing it now. I hate to say it to people who are parents of young children, but the time goes fast. I never wanted to hear that myself, because you want to keep them at the age they're at many times. Sometimes you want them to be a little older, but get started. It's going to be worth it. You're going to teach your children valuable skills and they're going to thank you, and you're going to be less stressed. And I think that's the thing we all need to remember.
Patricia, where can everybody get this?
Oh, my book, Route 529, is available on Amazon. I published it last October. I've got 67 reviews that are all 5 stars. I hope you two will consider reviewing it too. But people are saying it's easy to read until May 29th. So from May 1st to May 29th, I've lowered the price by $5. It was reasonably priced at $14.95. It's now $9.95. I want people to read this, and the electronic version is only $5.29. Please get it. Please read it. If you're interested, give it to people. I think you both found it was easy to read. I made a complicated subject very understandable. Yes. I want to help people. I really do have better outcomes, and it's possible.
Thank you so much, Patricia. We really appreciate your time today and sharing all of this with us. Thank you.
Thank you for educating your audience and yourselves. And I wish you all really good outcomes when the time comes.